He'd call me when something was hot, and he would just gnaw on me for 2 hours.
You remember that day that Edna Taylor called you up and chewed you out good, one side and down the other.
Yeah.
And she told you she had never voted for you, and your response was, Miss Taylor, you don't even live in my district. How could you vote for me?
Yeah. But she was all, but that, not only her, June Griffin used to call, you remember?
Oh, yeah.
All the mad people would call me on Sunday morning. They'd not have to leave her and try to go to church. But Earl would call me about Tuesday, Wednesday and say, we got some hot ones. What about coming in Sunday morning? I'd sit down there for 2 hours and they'd just gnaw on me and chew on me.
And at the end of the program, you know what he said? He'd say, look, I'll be glad to come back whenever you want me to.
Yeah.
There'd be 30 people tell him how sorry a job he was doing. Yeah. And at the end of the program, he says, you know, I really appreciate you coming
really
down
enjoyed it, didn't you?
and being, yeah, you enjoyed it. You said, I'll come back whenever you want me to.
Yeah. Well, that's what made you, Earl. That's because you're popular, because of me.
I don't know about that.
But you never did pay me. All I got was a free cup of coffee.
Well, we sent you a bill for that, and you had
That's
paid
all
the
I
checks.
got for a free cup of coffee.
Oh, man. But we did have a good time.
But you know, Earl, I'll say one thing about Earl. He was always fair. He never did try to trap you. You know, a lot of those radio people, when you get on there, I mean, they ask you something you hadn't even thought about. Don't have the answers.
Well,
Make it look stupid.
my philosophy was, don't try to trap whoever your guest is because you want them to come back.
Yeah.
So apparently it worked. How many times did you say you was on
42
that
on
program?
Sunday morning in 22 years.
Oh, boy.
But
What were some of the, let's see, we always talked about schools. We always talked about corrections.
Schools.
And
Whatever was happening at the
I'll tell you a
courthouse.
hot subject that you were involved in was when the county bought that Cavalier property. You remember that?
Yeah.
That was really, really controversial.
That was nasty.
And the river walk, when the county funded the river walk,
Yeah.
you got a lot of flack about that.
But that was one of the best things we ever done. In fact, I think we did a lot of good things, and unfortunately, we didn't say much about it. Isn't that right, Larry?
You got it, buddy.
You do a lot of great things, and you don't hear anything about it.
The first time that I met him was the day that he had the news conference. The other commissioner had to step down for some reason, and they brought Commissioner Adams in there. And one of them reporters asked him, says, what's Roy McDonald going to think about you running for political office? And he says, he endorses me 100%.
Yeah, he did, yeah.
He endorses me 100%.
Well, Earl, tell us some of the critical things that happened to you on radio, some of the nasty shows you had. Some that you would like to turn it off.
Oh, I got to tell you my snake story.
Snake story.
You didn't, you know, on that program we recorded, you didn't want to hear the snake story, did you?
I never heard it.
Huh?
No.
Don't you remember you told me you didn't want to hear it? The very first day that I went to work at WDOD, I got there about 10 minutes after 8. It's a Saturday morning. The chief engineer was Gene Lando. He says, now we have a lot of power outages out here on the river. So we got a generator downstairs, and you're going to have to be able to go down and crank the generator up. Says if you get down here when the power goes out, you can have the station back on the air in a couple of minutes, and nobody will know the difference. They'll just, think the record ran out and you've been in the bathroom. So I said, okay, let's go learn how to turn the generator on. We went downstairs, we opened up the generator room, and there was this big old rattlesnake that was coiled up. I mean, that was a big old sucker. And I said, how in the world are we going to escape this? There was one of these big old large music stands from back in the days when they had live shows over in the Hamilton Bank building. And that music stand was just inside the transmitter room door. Gene took that music stand, he said, step back. And he set that music stand right down on that rattlesnake and cut it into about 12 pieces. From then on, every time I went down to turn the generator on, I got the flashlight.
Yeah.
And I looked around to make sure there wasn't any snakes coiled up.
I know the part about when you had Minnie Pearl on it at the station for 5 hours one time. She was something else.
Well, that was thanks to Judge
Minnie Pearl was
Finkelstein's
famous.
daughter, Farrell Faye Finkelstein.
Yeah.
Judge Finkelstein, you remember?
Yeah.
That goes way back.
Yeah.
And she was good friends with Minnie Pearl, and Minnie Pearl came to town, did a cancer thing.
You interviewed Art Linkletter.
Art Linkletter right up here at this house at Willa and Bailey Avenue. That was Teen Challenge years ago.
Yeah.
And he came in for Teen Challenge, sat there and talked to us for 45 minutes.
Of course, you interviewed all the governors.
Yeah.
That's had a lot of.
They tell me I was the last one to interview Ray Blanton before he got into trouble.
Yeah.
And then the only person he talked to was Drew Smith. I got a picture of that.
Yeah. Well,
And
you
of
done
course,
good.
Lamar
You
Alexander.
done good, and you've had people
Winfield
like
Dunn. Winfield Dunn was very personable.
Yeah,
But I tell you, my favorite politician, and it's not Curtis Adams.
yeah, it
My
was.
favorite politician was Senator Baker.
Yeah,
Senator Baker would come to town, and I always, every time Senator Baker would come to town, I would go cover it, because afterwards he would sit there and talk with the media. Up in Dayton, Tennessee one day at the Western Sizzlin', he spoke to the chamber or some group. After the event was over, we went to the back room and we sat there for 2 hours. He gave the girl $25. He said, "Thank you for coming in, keeping our cup, coffee in our cups and tea in our glasses." But he sat there and he talked to us about world events, what was going on in Washington. I don't believe I've ever known, outside of you, a more open politician.
well, that's one good thing about being at the newspaper. All the prominent people come out of the newspaper. All the politicians, when they was running for office, they come out of the newspaper.
Yeah.
You got to meet them. Somebody said, "Come up to the newsroom, so-and-so's up here." And it was always interesting. I was there
The
40 years.
person that I really liked to talk to down there at the paper was Julius Parker. He had so many stories.
Yeah,
And Irby Park, those
Yeah.
guys covered. You remember Jimmy Hoffa when they had the Jimmy
Yeah,
Hoffa
yeah.
trial?
what about Buddy House?
Nobody any funny.
Wasn't he a
than
character?
Buddy. Yeah. His Mother's Day story that happened over here at Highland Park, that's a good one.
The FBI came in one time investigating something he'd wrote a story about, and they walked up there at his office, at his desk, and they said, "So-and-so FBI," and he jumped up and opened his billfold and said, "Buddy House, Red Food Store." He had him cracked up. He could call Lee Iacocca and get him on the
He
phone.
could call anybody.
Yeah.
He could call anybody.
He was an expert on automobiles. He drove one a week, every week. You remember?
The funniest story, though, was right after the fair moved out there to Amnicola Highway. And he called Luther that morning. He said, "Luther, I went to the fair last night." Luther says, "Well, tell me about it." He says, "Well, out in this big field, there's about 6 of these little buildings." And he said there was lines, all 6 of them. And it says, "Must have been a pretty good ride." It says, "Port Olet." And he says, Luther said, everybody coming out for that ride said they were just smiling to beat the band.
He called Luther. He said, "Luther, I got 4 tickets to the Alabama-Tennessee game," and said, "All you got to do is call me." So he gave a number. He left out the last 2 numbers and hung up.
You were the one trying to get those tickets.
Everybody
weren't you?
did.
Yeah. Who's the most interesting person that you have ever talked to in your career at the paper?
I'd say the most interesting politician I ever dealt with was Ned McWhirter. He was just a big, fat, friendly country guy, down to earth. Everybody liked him. And
Bill
easy to
Hollander
deal
was
with.
going to be mad at you because you didn't say Bill Hollander.
Well, Bill Hollander was the biggest nut I ever met.
Yeah.
He's a natural. Him and Russell Freudenberg could be on television and make a fortune.
People still come up to me today and ask me about when I used to talk to you in the morning.
Mm-hmm.
And you remember the time when we had all the flack about the school superintendent, and we couldn't keep a school superintendent.
Yeah.
And you had what type of
Puerto
plan?
Rico. I was going in
You
Puerto
was in
Rico.
Puerto Rico trying to find a school superintendent.
I
or
said we
something.
couldn't. We don't find one. We don't have anybody smart enough here. So I'm on an international search, and I was in Puerto Rico, and I flew over there on a cargo plane. They let me fly free if I helped unload the cargo.
And what about the time that you were over in Marion County up in a tree because you took out after the cockfighter?
Well, I was there at a cockfight and it raided it, so I had to hide out. I didn't want them to catch me, so I was up in a tree
I
talking to
remember
you.
that you called me wanting help too. didn't
Yeah, yeah.
you? And then one of the politicians that get in trouble, you'd call and say, "Well, I'm out running with Maybelle Hurley today out
Yeah,
here,"
yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
Or Jim Pickle, you remember the president of Erlanger?
Yeah,
You were
yeah.
running with him one day. I said,
Yeah.
"Why in the world you go running with Mr. Pickle for?" I said, "Well, I'm trying to teach him a few things about how to run a hospital."
Well, every Erlanger hospital president always winds up in trouble. I mean, I don't care how great they are; they wind up in trouble, getting running off. Buy them out. Buy them out.
And you ran with them to try to
Try to help them.
stabilize
Yeah,
them.
yeah, yeah.